Hi, my name is Patience, and on Wednesdays I do deep dives into topics that I find interesting, and today I want to talk about women and true crime. Like many women, I am fascinated by true crime, to the point where it's kind of concerning. I watch Bailey Sarian every Monday. Shana sha, shana sha, shana sha sha, shana sha. I also watch Netflix documentaries like Making a Murderer, the Ted Bundy tapes, and all that jazz. I do find it really interesting, and one thing I noticed whilst dabbling in this type of content is that a lot of the content creators who make these type of videos are women, and I also noticed that the people in the comment sections, the majority of them are also women. So I kind of got curious and started wondering, are women more interested in true crime than men? And if we are, then why? So I googled it, because when in doubt, Google. And as I was Googling it, I found that the BBC found that women are the predominant audience for watching true crime on Sony's True Crime channel. They also find that the true crime podcast All Killer No Filler, you can't tell me that doesn't sound like a rap song or a rap name. The All Killer No Filler True Crime podcast has an 80 to 85% female audience. So we make up a small majority, nothing major. A 2010 study also found that women tend to enjoy true crime novels more than men. Why are we so fascinated by serial killers and murderers, and what's wrong with us, really, is why I made this video. I was curious to know what's going on with the female brain. Like, what's happening? What drives us to be more interested in this type of content, especially when we are far less likely statistically to commit these crimes ourselves? Stats show that men commit 90% of homicides, so they're quite busy.
Just chill out. Drink a 7-Up. Eat a moon pie. Quit murdering people.
So today I want to discuss all of the reasons that I found when I was researching as to why women tend to have a greater interest in consuming true crime content than, say, our male counterparts. Dr. Gemma Flynn argues that one of the reasons why women tend to be more curious or more drawn to true crime is because of fear. Statistics show that men are actually far more likely than women to be victims of crime, especially violent crimes, and men have a higher statistical chance of being murdered than women. Data collected on England and Wales in 2020 found that men made up 73% of homicide victims, whilst women made up 27%. Similar patterns are also found in the US, where the FBI data shows that men account for 80% of homicide victims, whilst women account for 20%. However, despite these statistics, women still express a higher fear about being victims of crime. Dr. Flynn argues that this heightened fear that we feel about being victims of crime is what draws us to true crime documentaries or true crime shows, because knowledge is power, baby. The more we know about these people who are more likely to commit these crimes, the more we can equip ourselves by learning about other stories and hearing how they committed their crimes and what the situations were. It's a way of us, in a way, kind of tackling our fears head on and trying to prepare ourselves so that we know the best ways to stay safe, and also it's essentially self-preservation. We watch true crime as a form of self-preservation. Because of the way women are raised, from when we're young girls, this is the reason why we have very heightened fear around being victims of crime. From the moment we're kids, we're told things like, don't stay out too late, don't talk to strangers, and then as we grow older, it becomes watch what you're wearing, always look after your drink. So essentially all of this language that we're raised with is what conditions us to have such a high anxiety around being victims of crime and what makes us so fearful. Dr. Flynn argues that if our fears correlated with statistics, then we should be the ones walking men home for their safety, which I found kind of funny, because it's not funny. Obviously the reason why she's saying it isn't funny, but the idea of a 5-foot woman walking her 6-foot something boyfriend home for his safety is kind of funny to me. She goes on to argue that she worries that our consumption of true crime is actually perpetuating our fear of being victims of crime, because essentially we end up in this vicious loop where we're scared that we're going to be victims of crime, so we watch true crime, but then true crime makes us even more scared that we're going to become victims of crime, and so we continue to watch more true crime. So it's kind of just a bit of a mess. She argues that true crime perpetuates this idea that our victimhood is inevitable and imminent, when statistically that's not necessarily true. This is especially the case because women, we tend to have more of a fascination with serial killers for some reason. Those types of stories tend to be the ones that we are more interested in. But the issue is 70% of serial killer victims are women, and that's a really high number until you learn that serial killers are super rare, extremely extremely rare. So at this point, my audio dropped off. Love that for me. But basically all I was saying is that according to US records, serial killers account for less than 2% of overall homicides in the US, which is why despite the fact that women are 70% of serial killer victims, they still only make up 20% of overall victims of homicide compared to 80% of men. And even within that 20%, only a tiny portion of those murders are at the hands of a serial killer or a stranger. A big chunk of them are at the hands of the female victim's partner, so a boyfriend or husband. So that's right, ladies, we are out here stressed about the random guy on the street, but really you should be watching your man. Now, I can't help you tell if your boyfriend is a serial killer or if your boyfriend is a murderer, but all I'm gonna say is, if he uses the microwave to make his tea, I wouldn't trust him. So another reason why women tend to be higher consumers of true crime is because of compassion. Now, it's no secret that the way the mainstream media report on victims is incredibly biased. Most often what tends to happen is the type of victim stories that we see usually involve a woman. But because women are regularly featured as being victims of crime in the media, as women, we see ourselves in many of them. You know, we relate to a lot of their stories, or maybe they remind us of someone who we know, maybe a sister or a close friend. And so our compassion is what draws us to these stories and learning about these women and what happened to them. Fascination. Now, I feel like this is personally my reason for being really interested in true crime. I am fascinated by people. I'm fascinated by the way people think and why they do the things they do, hence why this video was even made in the first place. So one of the big reasons why women tend to be drawn to true crime is because of the fact that we as human beings and in general just tend to be very fascinated by human beings and understanding people who are different to us. The more people deviate from social norms, the more we find them fascinating. Psychologists have even found that women tend to have a higher fascination with people, whereas men tend to have a higher fascination with things, which is why women tend to do jobs that are people orientated. We tend to be more interested in doing jobs like human resources, nursing, social work, whereas men tend to be more interested in jobs like computer science and engineering. Therefore, maybe that's also the reason why we have a difference in terms of our interest with true crime. True crime is all about the people and understanding the minds behind the crimes, as well as also learning the stories about the victims. So our differences in psychology could also be the reason why women tend to be more interested in true crime than men. We are living in a time where everyone is an armchair expert. We've got armchair psychologists, armchair detectives. We've got people who will diagnose someone as a sociopath just because of one tweet. And of course, that also translates within true crime. There are people who like to watch true crime because they like to try and solve unsolved cases. They want to try and figure out who did it. And this is one of the big reasons why people like true crime as well. They like hearing the story and trying to put the pieces together, especially if the cases are still unsolved. This attraction to puzzles is also why people really like true crime games. I can't remember the name of this game, but if anyone can, please help me. But there was a game that I remember where people would like dress up. It was like a role play game. Everyone gets a character and one person gets the role of being the killer or the murderer, and everyone just has to try and figure out who was the murderer, who did it. Now, I don't know what the name of this game is. My mind wants to say Inspector Gadget, but I know that's definitely not right. So if anyone knows the name of that game, please let me know. But yeah, like I think that's the reason why games like that are so popular, is because people just like to figure things out, and that's one of the reasons why they like true crime. Julia Davis argues that true crime allows women to escape into a compelling, awful, but exciting story for them to enjoy, but from a distance. Arguably, this is also one of the many reasons why some people are against the consumption of true crime, because at the end of the day, these are not just stories, these are real cases, and these are real victims. And there are people who think it's incredibly unethical to consume someone's horrific experience as some kind of entertainment. This has put into question the ethics of monetizing these types of videos or monetizing this type of content. And Ada on Demand also made a really interesting video on this where she touched on that topic. She was discussing the ethics of monetizing or profiting off of real tragedies. It raises the question of how ethical is it to consume true crime stories that happen to real people in a similar way to the way we would consume a novel or an entertaining TV show. I will link Ada's video in the description as well if you're interested in taking a look. Here's my my personal take on this whole ethics debate, right? I personally think that yes, people should be mindful of how they are telling these stories and how they are going about it, because especially if you're talking about more recent events, because the victims' families are still very much, they're still coping with it, so it can be quite a touchy subject and people should be quite sensitive to that. However, I also feel like the way the mainstream media reports on true crime kind of makes it almost too easy for people to disconnect from the realities that these are things that happened to real people. For example, they over sensationalize a lot of these crimes and they give all of these serial killers nicknames like the Night Stalker, the Killer Clown, Jack the Ripper, the Campus Killer, and the list goes on and on and on. And these names alone sound like thriller titles or book titles. They don't seem like do you know what I mean? This sensationalism, in my opinion, also contributes to how we end up detaching from the reality that these are real events. But as much as we do it, we have to admit there is something a little bit strange about being enthusiastic to learn about these stories. Bailey Sarian has even said on her channel that when she doesn't upload, people call her up on it. People will be like, hey, where's the murder? And I find that so strange that there are people who like you're fiending for it at this moment. Like you're just like, I need to hear about a kill. Yeah, there's something really wrong about that. I don't know. I can't judge you because I also consume true crime, but I wouldn't go out of my way to demand to hear a murder story. Like, I don't know, that's just, you need help, babe. There are some people who worry about the long-term effects of us consuming true crime in terms of our mental health as well as desensitization. And I don't know how legit that worry is, because when you think about it, if people are saying they're concerned about desensitization, I would argue that TV shows and films that feature these type of horrific events would have the same effect too, no? I don't personally see the difference between consuming true crime and watching, say, like a horror film or a TV show that features the same kind of events. Like, I know people will argue, well, one is real and one isn't, but a lot of these films and TV shows are inspired by real killers and real events that did happen a lot of the time. That's how they get a lot of their inspiration and stuff. And I would find it weird if someone would argue that consuming true crime would have this effect, but somehow watching TV shows or films that feature the same kind of things doesn't have an effect. I would feel like all of them would equally have a detrimental effect. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. If you disagree, let me know. We are social creatures. We will always be fascinated by each other as well as ourselves. And I think that as long as there are people who deviate from the norm or people who are so far away from what we are, we will always be fascinated by them. This is the reason why we watch TV shows like 600 Pound Life or My Strange Addiction or Extreme Hoarders. We like to see people who we don't encounter on a regular day-to-day, and we like to learn about them and understand them. And I think as women, like I said, psychologists have found that we're more fascinated by people, so it makes sense that we'd be drawn to people who are very different to us and people who do things that aren't things that we can imagine, because we want to understand, like, how did we become that? And I think especially with these kind of extremes, the more extreme the person is, the more interested we are. When it translates to true crime, it becomes the more insane or the more severe the crime, the more intrigued we are by it, which is a little bit concerning. But I guess it's just because at the end of the day, we're always fascinated to know just how far these extremes go. So yeah, out of all of the explanations that I found, I would definitely say that Fascination is the one that fits me the most. I definitely watch true crime because I'm fascinated by these people and their minds and, you know, their backgrounds, how they grew up, or, you know, what kind of things could have led them to becoming that way. But I'm interested to know which ones fit you the most. Out of the ones that I've given, would you say any of those describe you? Or do you have another reason for why you watch true crime? Let me know down below in the comments. I would love to hear it. Well, if you made it this far into the video, then you might as well like and subscribe so we can hang out some more. I'm also on Instagram and TikTok, so you should follow me on there for more content. And I also make really good music, so if you want to check that out, links to my socials and my music will be in the description box. Thank you very much for giving me your time today, and I will see you in the next video.